afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're listening with us. We're just really happy that you are here. Thank you so much for joining us for part two of trying new things. So, had a little bit of technical difficulties finishing out and doing the full episode, but Tanner and I talked and we realized it was probably too long anyway, and we decided it'd be better to break up into two parts. So, just a little recap of what we were talking about when trying new things. We went through a 6-step program, of which we have also talked about, and now Tanner decided it's really more of a 4-step program with the last two, steps 5 and 6, really emphasizing step 4. So, when we're trying new things, we start with step 1, which is just the big research, the kind of how to research, right? What are we looking for? What's the basis that we need, grasping the understanding of the overall concept. And then we have the pre-learn slash study concept. This is more focused on what details do I need to feel a little bit more comfortable before dipping my toe in to actually trying this, right? And then we go into that self-test mode. So this is the dip in a toe. This is just making sure that we are building our confidence the way that we want to and feeling that we are good to basically kind of put ourselves out there into going to join the club, going to whatever place we talk about, basically to step 4, finding that community and willing to be participating in that community. Which, again, step 4, find the community specifically for you and your interest, right? So, what are you looking for? What are you wanting to get out of it? And how do you want the people within that community to help you? So, that could be a competitive base, that could be hobbyist base, that could be just purely looking for something fun to do, that could be working on just maybe finding a bigger or expanding your friend group, whatever it is, you want to find a community that's specific for you. And we talked about that you should try at least 3 to 5 different locations, different communities to really get a good assessment of what you're looking for. And if you can't find anything after those 3 to 5 locations, then that's when we kind of say red flag number 1, maybe this isn't for us, at least at the time. And that's where we kind of cut off. And it was a good stopping point because it hits all 4 steps. And so now we're going to expand a little bit further onto this community, what it means to find the community that is right for you, and going into that a little bit more in depth. And then we'll finish off with some tips and tricks. So, expansion, let's call it 4.1. Yeah, let's call it 4.1. So, when you're looking for a community, we are let me backtrack. It's very important to understand that most people in this world are not trying to make fun of you and are not going to be hostile towards you. I think we have a lot of fear that people always going to look at us negatively because we don't necessarily fulfill the perfect mindset. Wouldn't you probably agree with that, Tanner? Like, people are just trying to fulfill unknown, I wouldn't even say unknown, unrealistic expectations that aren't actually there to begin with, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, and I feel like the negatives just they speak louder than the positives sometimes, or they sound louder. Like it resonates a little bit more with people when they have a bad day rather than when they have a good day. So,
exactly, and it starts to fill that void of the what do people are going to think of me,
mhm.
and they always just seem like they're just going to think negatively of me. And I just from my experience, when I see new people, whether it's new lifeguards, new people coming into jiu-jitsu, the first thing that I'm thinking of when I see them is cool, we got someone new. I get to interact with someone different, and that's already a part of our community. And my goal is to kind of bring them into the community, right? And I feel like a lot of people are in the same boat. Like, when they see someone new join, it's not like, oh, who's this? Get them out of here. They have interest into seeing who this person is, right? Now there may be
Right.
some nervousness and things like that, but never really, I think, in a general environment, is there going to be judgment. But if there is, then that's definitely something that needs to be noted. But I don't think people should go in trying something new expecting judgment. I think if we have the positive mindset of, okay, I'm going to try new things, I'm going to see what this community is like, I think a lot of people are going to be less fearful. And then if that judgment comes, then okay, so be it. This is only one of the 3 to 5 locations that we'd even be trying in the first place.
Hmm.
So, uh, but Tanner, what are your thoughts on that? How can what advice do you have for people that this is the fear? It's not so much trying a new thing, it's the fear of people looking negatively upon them. And what did you do, or what do you do to maybe counter this concept to build that confidence to try a new place, especially a public place?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always going to be easier said than done to kind of just change your mindset on that. But I was kind of the same way. I was resistant to trying new things and resistant to opening myself up to like new people. But one thing that I realized kind of along the way, my journey is just that the only thing that you can control is like your actions, right? And
Yeah.
going into these communities and like kind of taking that leap, um kind of forgetting about what anybody's going to think about you is going to do more positive things for you that you could ever imagine. I mean, if you are if you're always operating on fear, that's never going to be a good way to kind of do something and branch into those new communities. Like if you're doing it, um, you know, or not doing it strictly based on what you think they might think, then at the end of the day, I mean, it really doesn't matter what they think. And I think we'll get to this point a little bit later. The fact that we talked about it a little bit earlier. It was like they're really, I mean, you're not going to meet a lot of people in your life that are just trying to tear you down or
Right.
like rooting against you. That's not like that's not common,
It's not a
and those,
common, yeah, it's not a commonality.
yeah. And those people who I've encountered in my life, they didn't stay in my life long because it's just like, okay, you don't want to like you don't want to see me succeed, or you don't want to be positive towards me. I'm not going to be positive towards you. And it kind of goes back to the principle of like, treat others with the way that you want to be treated. And if they're
Yep.
treating you like that, then why should you treat them with a different positive outlook on it? So kind of I kind of tangent a little bit right there, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of a problem nowadays where it's like the only thing that worrying about what people are thinking about you is going to do is it's going to limit the opportunities and the doors that you can open for yourself. you know
Well, I think you make a really good point too. Is you talked about when people were placing judgment on you, those relationships really didn't last long, and
yeah,
that's kind of what we're essentially telling everyone to look for. Is if you go to your first place and they're hating on you, then that is not the community you want to be a part of. At minimum, we know for a fact that's not the community you want to be a part of. So
yeah,
I just think what happens is if that's our first interaction with whatever trying new, it becomes an instant stereotype that, okay, if these people are jerks, then everywhere these people are jerks. And
right,
that's what we're trying to avoid. I think that's why it's so important that you try multiple communities before being like, okay, this is just not it, right? This is not my brand of people. But you see this, there's always a big scale all the way from left to right on all these communities. And gyms, I think, are very good setup of this, right? You have, what is it, like Gold's Gym, like the bodybuilder gym, where all they are there is to lift as heavily as humanly possible.
yeah,
And they tend to be a little louder.
Yeah.
We'll just be there. But
Slamming the weights on
there's
the
an
ground. Yeah.
intimidating group of people for some people. And then you have on the other side of the spectrum, I think it's like Planet Fitness, where they understand that not everyone wants to be a bodybuilder that makes loud noises because that's awkward from people. For some people, if you just hear just like and just like people slapping
Clang.
each
Yeah.
other, like that would be
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that whole spectrum, if you're trying something new, you may very well start out at Planet Fitness and just get your groove going. That's really what Planet Fitness is for. A lot of people I feel like hate on that because I don't know, it's got purple or because there's literally a loud alarm. So if they're too loud, like you may get kicked out. But it's also to create a comfortable culture for people very uncomfortable with working out for the very first time. So I actually give a lot of kudos to Planet Fitness for
Oh,
understanding
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
people needed that and fulfilling that, right? So, but this is for everything, right? You're going to get the insane and the intense. And I feel like a lot of people think everything is insane and intense, but reality, there's always going to be a Planet Fitness out there for you and for whatever new thing that you're trying. If we're
Hmm.
over here trying to compete with Joe Rogan, we would be way more intimidated. And so we're not worried about that when we're doing our podcast. Our podcast is solely focused on our employees and really anyone willing to listen. And that's all we want. We just want anyone that's interested in just hearing how they can kind of approach things in a different way, maybe a more efficient way or things like that. That's it. We're not trying to be a huge, massive influencer to get people to change their minds on things. It's just what we feel like we've seen from our perspective, our time in life, and kind of the shortcuts we would have liked. And that's a lot less intimidating when we just get to talk about our experiences, our perspectives, and our awareness of others than it is if someone says, hey, you're going to talk about this. Like if we had like a manager, right? And like, you have to talk about this. Well, that's not really
Hmm.
how this is going to flow. We're never, I don't think ever going to have a manager that says you're talking about this next, no questions asked. That
Yeah.
takes it away from us. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think it's about truly understanding what is that balance? Where are we at? And where do you want to be? And I think as at least as of right now, I think we're already where we want to be. And this is what's helped us continue to push through this podcast. And even through like a negative point. We had so many good talking points in the end of episode 1 that no one's going to hear. And I don't know you,
Yeah.
but I
I
was a little
know.
depressed. Like I
Yeah.
was really depressed. Like that was good. First one, it was beautiful. And to be like, yeah, that it's gone. Like there's no way to recover it. It really did suck, and we had to take another day in the same week that we didn't usually do to make up for that. But because we have that kind of inspiration, that goal that we're what we understand what we're doing for, because I think we have the relationship that we have while depressed a little bit. It's not the end of the world, and we're still enjoying it, right? And
Yeah.
that makes me feel better because I don't we don't necessarily aren't concerned about the others saying, hey, like we messed up and there's not shame upon us for that happening. And I know that our listeners, the real OGs that are going to be listening, aren't going to care that we ended up splitting this into a part 2. And that's what's really important because the people that do judge us and be like, wow, you can't even record one podcast fully, they're not going to be part of this community, right?
Yeah.
This is the non-judgment zone. This is the we are
Yeah.
human, we have flaws, and so we're gonna you know
Well,
do the
because it's
best
like
that we can
we
and move
know
on.
we're not. I didn't go to school for audio engineering.
Now I'm still over here trying to figure out audio. It's
Yeah.
it's like I was screaming at you earlier just to make sure it sounded good.
Yeah. But that's a good point. I mean, you brought it up like the community that we're in right now. We don't have a manager over us telling giving us topics like
Mm,
spewing us topics to be like, oh, you got to talk about this. And but we do have a community where it's like they are very supportive of what we're doing. They
yep.
know that this is like very new, but they support us, kind of doing this, going out of our comfort zone, and branching out to try this, even if it's, I mean, this could be a complete fail. Like I think you said it. I don't know if it got caught if before the audio
Yeah, we'll
got cut
see.
out, but I think you said it yesterday. I mean, or a couple days ago, you were like, this podcast, the life could be 5 months. We could get 5 months down the road and be like, okay, this isn't what, or 6 months, this isn't what we envisioned it. It's not, whatever. Or in 6 months, we could look at it and be like, oh, wow, we have like, this many, active listeners, and we kind of just go from there. But we would have never, I mean, if we had a different community that we were in, or like a different family at Barefoot, we may not have been able to do something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Because this was, I think the overall laying difference is, and this is what I love about Charles, right? He has all the ideas, and whatever ideas that you have, which was, the example of this podcast, Charles didn't say, I want a podcast, who's going to do it? And I feel like if Charles was like, hey, Tanner Parker doing a podcast, um, we need people to hear you. To me, I'm going to have a much different approach to that, because now it's, am I fulfilling what Charles is expecting of me? But instead, you went to Charles and be like, I think a podcast would be a great idea. It's a great way to reach our employees. We are getting to the point, you alone have 150 employees. You know, Barefoot in its totality has 800 to 900 employees. How are we
Hmm.
supposed to see them all? It's just not possible. And
Right.
you were able to see that and found the solution of, here's how people can hear us and see us at least once a week, every week. And I think that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it great, is Charles just says, cool, let me know how it goes. And now we get
Right.
to just make it our own, and we get to do it how we would like to do it. So this is really a good example of the community that we're searching for, at least even within a company. But this is what you have to look for within yourselves, right? Is, do you want absolute freedom to make yourself as much involved in a community as you want? Do you want a little bit of mentorship with a little bit of like self figuring out what you're trying to figure out? Or do you just want someone to tell you what you're doing, and you kind of take the task based approach to improve in whatever you're trying to do, with this new concept? So that's, I feel like, is the best example that we can kind of say when you're searching for a community, and just like the base overall mentality. Obviously, there's so much branching out from that, and that's only going to be something that and that's why it's very important that you know who you are. And I know we have talked about, discovering who you are as a person, because it allows you to figure out what you're actually looking for. But the flip side of that is, if you're not sure who you are, then you have to try new things to gain that experience, to see if that actually is something that you would do, if that actually is you, right?
Right.
And I use my example of jiu-jitsu. I originally thought jiu-jitsu was just cool. It just looked fun. I knew people of all ages did it. I knew there was like it was actually at my gym at the time, where a 68-year-old got promoted to blue belt. 68
Wow.
years old, man, like retirement age, got his blue
Yeah.
belt. So I knew that this was, you can only play football for so long, right? You
Yeah.
can
I couldn't
only,
imagine a 68-year-old
yeah,
playing
like
football.
there's not a lot of things that you can do throughout your entire life. At some point, it just becomes difficult. And people are like, well, Parker, jujitsu, like that's wrecking the joints. But there's a lot of older people doing jujitsu. And worst comes to worst, if I can't do jujitsu at 68 years old, then I at least will probably have a decent enough fitness level to do things a lot easier than other people, because my goal is I don't want to be, if I can help it, I don't want to be the person where it hurts to get up, and be able to move. And my wife, she's a Casey, she's a physical therapist assistant. And she says really the big difference between the older people that are kind of stuck where they are, like in bed or barely moving, versus the people that are out and about and moving freely, are just doing some basic form of exercise, even if that's just walking,
Mm,
and some people are doing like Zumba and moving around and dancing and going
yeah.
through it, whether it be water aerobics, but it really is like that movement. And that to me is what was important. And I took that concept along with it would be really cool to, because I'm not a huge person, and jujitsu, I wasn't say it was focused on smaller people, but it definitely is a benefit that you don't have
Like
to be a
size doesn't
massive
matter
person
in
to be.
that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter as much.
As
Now, if I
much.
went
Yeah.
against a 300 person Goliath, yeah, I'd probably struggle. But for the most part, the weight classes can almost be more expanded because it is so much more technical based. And that was the other side that I liked about it. And then that was the initial reason why I did it. And that turned into my obsession and love that I just am a jiu-jitsu nerd and I want to go every single day for 6 hours, 10 hours a day if I could. I don't, but I wish I could. So this is what I realized was a part of me, and I never would have figured that out just by saying, "Oh, jiu-jitsu is cool," but never really acting on what is that like and trying it out. Um, so my bad on the tangent. I apologize. I don't know how well that kind of leaked in back to our 4.1, but
Any chance you get to
in
talk about jujitsu, man?
that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I strongly firmly believe it'll happen once per episode minimum.
That's fine.
And
That's
that's
fine.
that's fine. And y'all can get over it. And if you want to hate me on it, I'll show you where my gym is, and then I'll show you how
You can
cool it
join.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's just a great place. But look for the basics of, find a community that's obviously not going to make fun of you and not going to judge you. I think that's base foundation number one. And then part two to that is if that community goes above and beyond and actually tries to help you, wanting to help you, wanting you to be successful and take time out of their day to do that, then that is a strong community because now it's a community helping and it's focused on helping everyone succeed, not just themselves. And I think that's always what we can look for when we're really trying to establish that is, are they, you know, trading with kindness, loving and supporting me, and if they go a step above and beyond and take some of their time away to help me specifically, and multiple people are doing that, then you found yourself a really well established community. And that can
Hmm.
be on the welcome to Planet Fitness side, or that could be all the way to, all right, so you want to be a bodybuilder, let's go.
Yeah.
It's all in the same spectrum. That intensity, that's specific to your needs, but the basic foundation of any community is feeling welcome and feeling like you're going to get help and support from everybody.
Hmm.
4.2, again, we're still talking about the community, so 4.2, in this community, can you go the next day? That's pretty much how I want you guys to visualize this is, can you go the next day, and on an off day, if your community says, "Hey, where are you at? Do you want to go and see them?" Because this was what really established my community when I went to Gracie Gym in Richardson. Is I would go and I really enjoyed doing it, and then I was a little tired, or I wanted to take a nap. Like I loved it, but I just didn't want to go that day. And we were all in a group text, and they would literally text me like, "Hey, Parker, where you at?" And I was like, "Oh, dang," like it was like a
Like, made
weird,
you
like I
feel bad,
almost let
yeah.
them down.
Yeah,
Like, no, I obviously didn't, but it increased that sense of belonging because they noticed that I wasn't there. They held me accountable, and I every time I got that message, and like I said, this was multiple times that maybe I didn't want to go. I would always get that message, and I would just want to go see them again. It was definitely once I got the message, like, you know what, I'm going next time, no questions asked, and I did. And that's that's what you should feel. In You may not feel that right away. You may not feel that within the first week or so, or even maybe the first month or so. Although if you can, like that's great and that's phenomenal. But I want you to try and search for this feeling for 6 months because we talked about, or you brought this up, right? Mastery uh, is about 10,000 hours of that skill. And that's a lot of hours. I think I actually told it up for you, and it was 400 something days. So, uh, 24/7, by the way. So, this is obviously like, oh, in a year and a quarter, I can be master. No, on average, you're going to try whatever new thing you're doing for about an hour and probably for starting out about 3 days a week. And I think I did the
yeah.
math on that was 78 hours, right? So
I
it's
mean,
what, three times 20, 26? Yeah, 78 hours for
yeah,
6 months.
yeah, even more like simple math, like 10 hours a week, that's kind of a lot. Like 10 hours a week doing something is kind of a
Oh, yeah.
lot. And that takes you 1,000 weeks.
Yeah. And what are there, 52 weeks in a. So now let's just have fun with math, right? So 10 hours a week. So that's what, 520. So even then,
20 years,
um, that's what our,
right?
oh,
My
jeez,
math's not crazy.
I'm getting there. It's still 20 years. Is that
Yeah,
right? It's
20
52
years.
weeks times 10
But when we're
and then
talking about
10,000
this,
divided by 5.
it's like mastering
True.
something.
We are
You
talking
are
about
an
mastery.
expert. Like you
You are
are
correct.
like, yeah, like when I'm talking about like mastering, if you're mastering guitar, you need to be able to play any song I tell you from 1930 on to now on whatever guitar I give you. Then you're a master at that
It's true.
instrument or you're a master at that. Like
That is crazy.
if you're a master, like there's only like, if you're a master at basketball, you're making the NBA. Or probably even like not that's probably not even master level, you know?
Honestly, yeah, because what is practice? Like 2 hours Monday through Friday. If you start and you wouldn't even really do that at ages 3, 4, and 5. Like I don't think you
Yeah.
hit daily practice until middle school.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Middle
So
school and then yeah, high school is when they start to get, or I guess middle school is probably when you start to be able to have a little bit more freedom of like
mhm,
putting in your own practice, right? Like working away from your team, like on yourself, and putting in that time. Like that's why, like I know, like any story that you try and look up about, like Kobe Bryant, it's always like, oh, he was there whenever I would get there early, and then he wouldn't leave until the last person had left the gym, and that was just like who he was because like he's in the league from when he was 18, so from probably even before that when he was like 12, 11, he probably started that resume of
yeah.
just working his tail off. But
And this actually brings up a good point because actually hold on to that thought. Let's go back because this is an important topic that I definitely want to talk about. So we want you to try something for at least 6 months. And if that's 3 hours a week, that's 78 hours, which is like 0.0001% of mastery.
right.
And I think this is a good way to show that so many people are trying to be perfect, right? They're trying to achieve that master level. And it's just not something that you're going to complete in a week or two or even 6 months, and that's a half a year. That's a pretty really good amount of time to
Yeah.
continuously stick to something and then realize. that mastery is still so much further down the road. And if anyone's feeling daunted or negative by that, like, well, then what's the point of trying to do something if it takes so long to master it? Well, don't worry. That's not the point. The point is, in 6 months, when you do something for 6 months, you will have a really good understanding if you want to stick to it, or at least how far you want to stick to it.
Right.
Right. And so you brought this up, 5 or 6 months down the road, I think we will have a really good understanding of how we want to go about this podcast. If it dies, it dies. I can tell you from experience right now, I'm not feeling like this is going to die in 5 or 6 months. I am having an absolute blast doing this podcast. And while there's frustrations of audios and things like that, you know, this is what I live for, right? Like being able to talk about stuff like this, knowing it's going out to people and doing it with someone that I really appreciate and value at the same time. Like I got my buddy, like my partner in crime on this. Like this is definitely going places. But
Yeah.
the 6 month mark, I think, is a very good just baseline to truly give yourself the maximum chance of understanding, yes, this is it. Right. And it allows you to form relationships with your community. It allows you to grow within a community, grow the community itself. It allows you to see so much. And it gives you that, okay, at 6 months, if this is not the way, then you gave it 6 months. And there's really no one that's saying, like, oh, you quit because
Hmm.
it didn't quit for 6 months. How are you going to tell me I quit? If you quit on day
Yeah.
one, though, like, yeah, I mean, there should be some like you quit, and there needs to be some honesty and accountability of that. So we push for 6 months, we see what can happen, and in the 6 month time frame, you should give it everything you absolutely can. Like,
Hmm.
you know, don't go. You know, if I'm doing jujitsu, don't go 6 hours a day every single day of the week for 6 months. You are going to die. You're going to burn it. That's not, you want to just dab your toe, look back on it, dab your toe, look back on it. You just want to keep going back and forth. That's why I think this like 3 hour mark is pretty solid, right? Because you do basketball, right? You do rec
Yeah.
league basketball, and so how many hours are you? And you love basketball, so it's going to be. But even then, like how many hours are you putting into this per week?
Oh gosh. I mean, counting the hour that we play every Thursday, I mean, probably 3 to 4 hours, right? But
See?
like growing up, when I had more time and like I was on the journey of like, hey, I can make the NBA, when
Mhm.
I was like a kid, when that was never an option. Let me be clear to everybody listening to this. That was never gonna happen. But, my delusional kid self, yeah, I was there every single day. But like you're saying, I think it's a good point. Like it took me falling in love with the sport
Mhm.
to be able to go to 24-hour fitness every single day for 3 to 4 hours and like only leave whenever my mom was like, hey, dinner's ready. You need to come home now. You've been there for 5 hours, you know? Like it was like she had to like pry me away from it because I had fallen in love with it by trying, and trying for me started when I was a kid watching like, the NBA or like college
Mhm.
basketball, right? And like it started with that, and it was like, okay, I knew I loved that, and I was like, oh, let me go, play by myself, and I go out there and I teach myself how to shoot, teach myself how to do all that, and it was like a instant, just like fell in love with it. um, but I mean, like you're saying, like at the start, I didn't want to do it every day. And I'm glad I didn't do it every day because if I did it every day from the start, I probably wouldn't have as much love for it as I do now.
Yep.
And
And it's
and
very,
even
very smart to identify.
yeah. Yeah, and even going forward with it, like if I would have because this happens to a lot of high school athletes, is like they get to the point where it's like maybe they've been on varsity, maybe they haven't. And it's like maybe they're in their junior or senior year and they're like, okay, how far do I want to take this? And
Mhm.
like for me back then, I was a little bit shorter than I am now. I was a little bit skinnier. I wasn't as good at basketball as I am now, and I was like, it was an easy decision for me. I was like, I still love the sport, but I know I'm not going anywhere with it. I had given it like so much effort for so long that it got to a point where I was just like, okay, I need to make a decision. And I was like, I am no longer going to play basketball. Now, I still would love, I'd still give back to the sport by
Yeah.
coaching youth teams. And like, I still, I mean, I watch hours of basketball a day, you know? So like, I still participate in that, you know, community, just in like a different way. Like, I'm not, my contributions on the court in like a competitive setting away from my rec league, those days are done,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But you know, it's like, but I can look back on it being like there are certain things that maybe I wish I did a little bit better in basketball, but at the same time, I look back on it, I just look back at the journey, and I'm like, this is why I loved it so much. And it's like, uh, there's a guy named Patrick Beverly who plays in the NBA, and he has a really good bit about this. And he's like, if you're at home and you know you get your grades back and like they're not as good as you would think, like I'm gonna go pick up my ball, or like, oh, I go on a date with a girl and like you know it doesn't go well. Okay, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna pick up my ball, or like all these things happen in his life. Like there was always one solace of like picking up his basketball, going out to a hoop, and just playing basketball by himself. And like
Yes.
I can resonate with that like a lot, you know.
And this, I love the every time you tell like stories like this, it always just like, yes, I just want like, yes, this is it, this is it, this is it. And this brings up really kind of like the next point within that is when you do this for 6 months is our time, we're doing three-ish hours a week to get a good understanding of it. There will be points, and especially at that 6 month point, you're going to be like, I want more. I don't want 3 hours a
Hmm.
week. I want 6 hours a week. I want 10 hours a week. Or
Right.
you're going to get the other end of the spectrum where, okay, this wasn't it. This wasn't, I gave it my best. But even if you choose to pursue when you're like, oh, I want more, like that may be a point where you do that and then you may take a step back. And instead of going 6 to 10, maybe you go to three. Or maybe you do your three for 6 months and then you just kind of think maybe I'll just do 1 hour a week. Maybe that's just what you realize it's still fun, but you don't want to dedicate necessarily 3 days a week, 3 hours a week, however you're visualizing this, to whatever you're doing. You want to open up new opportunities and new things to try, but you're not
Right.
necessarily going to give up on that. So I think whatever path you're taking, it doesn't really matter. 6 months is going to tell you whether you want to continue with it, whether you want to advance in it, or whether you want to back off of it. And this is the goal, is just to let you see what you're trying to really get out of this and to let you see the kind of person that you are. And then there's a question of, should everything that I do be to seek mastery? To me, I'm going to say no. You know, it's, if that's what you want to do, then yes, you should by all means seek mastery. But you'd have to make that decision. And if down the road it ends up being where you get half mastery, you only want 5,000 hours and you're satisfied with that, then that's totally fine. Allow yourself to pivot and move and go into another direction.
Hmm.
There's there's the one percenters. Why they do the things that they do for the most part, spending all this money and doing all these things, and why you still hear them being unhappy even though they have all the money in the world, right? They can buy whatever car they want, they can buy a yacht, they can do all these things, and yet happiness is down low. The reason for that, in my simplest opinion, is they stopped trying new things and they kept just buying new things. And there's a huge difference between trying new things and buying new things. Now, I know for a fact if I bought myself an Aston Martin, I would be very, very, very happy. But it's only going to fulfill my, let's call it my happy meter up a notch. But it's not going to make me any happier than that maximum happiness that I feel for the Aston Martin. And my happy meter is constantly growing. And so I could replace it and buy something nicer. I could buy another house, but it's not going to fill my happy meter. My happy meter is the journey. Most people, most of these wealthy individuals had the time in their life getting to that point, not
Hmm.
being at that point. And if I could talk to all of them, and they may look down at me like, well, I could crush you with my wallet. Maybe, I don't know. but
Yeah.
but I truly think that if they want to fill that happy meter, they should try new things. And you do see a lot of highly wealthy people do this, you know. And then Mark Zuckerberg, I think, is a great example. $1 billion man, Facebook, all sorts of crazy things. And over the past year or so, he's tried jujitsu, of which he's sticking with and still doing it. I think he's like starting some kind of like cow farm or something like that, but he basically wants to raise his own cattle, and then, make meat, steaks, whatever. But he wants to do it in his own way. Totally random. This guy is social media like top
Trillion
dog,
dollars. Yeah.
going on a ranch and raising some cows. Like,
Yeah.
but this is smart of him.
How do you think your match would go against the Zuckerberg?
I don't know, man. I feel like he's a blue belt, and
Okay.
he got his blue belt in 1 year. So that's impressive. It's not incredibly impressive, but it's definitely faster. It takes about a year and a half, 2 years roughly to get your blue belt for the common
Mm,
trainer.
okay.
But I feel
We
like
got
he's getting like pretty good private lessons and things like that. So
we got
I
to see if
would love to
we can
roll with
set this
him.
up.
I would love to roll with him. I I want to say I would win just because I've been doing it a little bit longer. But like I said, time in doesn't always mean like quality, you know?
Right, right.
So while I like to admit that I'm fairly good as a blue belt, um, I want to be humble and say like there's definitely going to be a chance where he could take me out. Um, so Mark, if you're
Well, if
listening to this,
anybody,
man,
yeah, I
I'll
was about to
send
say,
it
if
up.
anybody knows him, yeah, if anybody knows Mark,
Yeah.
hook us up. We got it right here.
Fly me out on a jet. That would be pretty cool. I think if he flew me out on a jet, though, I wouldn't want to tap him. So maybe he has to come to
Yeah,
me so I can feel, I don't know. That'd be super cool, though. If I ever got to say I could roll with Mark Zuckerberg, win or lose, I would be so happy.
I mean,
And
that's a
I
story
think
you're telling like your
this is
great great
why I love
grandkids.
jujitsu, like that it brings commonality to people. I would never touch Mark Zuckerberg. I will never in my life be able to be at that level. Maybe. All right. But the chances are slim. But then if I were to randomly meet this guy, I could talk to him like normal about jujitsu. And that's a commonality, even when we have so many differences in
Right.
lifestyles. And that's just why I love it. So, Mark, if you're out there, hit me up. I'll show you a cool move, show me a cool move, and then we'll roll. And that'll be a great time.
Yeah, you'll show him a cool jujitsu move, and he's gonna show you 10 Aston Martins in his garage.
Dude, that'd be it. Maybe
He's
we
like,
can
"Oh, this is
roll
your
for an
dream
Aston
car?
Martin.
Yeah, this is your
Get it
dream car.
and
I have 12 of them.
yeah,
I have an Aston
and
Martin factory in my house."
he's just gonna buy another one for funsies, pass the
Yeah.
time by. Uh, anyway, I think this was a good summary. Is minimum 6 months, 3 hours a day. I think it's a good starting point for everybody, and see what you go from there. But no, I don't think you should expect yourself to try and be a master at everything. You'll If it's 10,000 hours to master something, time is limited, and there's so many things to learn: languages, sports, clubs, everything, right? Even about cars, about sports, like just learning about them and that kind of stuff is a lot. So, but I once you feel good about it, then you can decide there and you get to go from there. And I want that to alleviate the pressure of I get to try this because I just get to try this and not because there's an expectation that I have to
I have to
be
do this.
mastering
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a way to kind of view that mindset and then you get to reflect and you get to move on. So there's all the steps. Not even really the steps. Again, it's that it goes into that community level because the community is what's going to keep you there for 6 months. They're what's going to hold you accountable to show up for your 3 days a week or whatever you're looking for. And that community, I think, is the final step is the most crucial because really you could technically skip the first three. If you just find yourself a good community, then all of that information that you would have gotten is just going to come to you, right? Because you have a positive community that's not judging you, that's giving you all the information that you would have studied.
Hmm.
The reason for this 4 step program, I guess we can call it, is for those that are too nervous to step into a community right away, which is me, right? And I think this is a lot of people. And every time when I was looking for a jiu-jitsu school, it took me I think 2 months to do all my research to figure out what I was doing and feel comfortable to step into the first gym. And then that experience didn't even go very well. And I could have been discouraged by that, but instead I just looked for other schools nearby and I found another one. And then that one was pretty decent, but it wasn't everything. And it wasn't until I went to my third school that I found everything that I wanted.
Hmm.
And and this is why uh, this is what we're trying to say. It's not going to happen in your first try magically. If you can't just step into something, that's fine. Do steps 1 through 3. Really follow through with step 4. Use 4.1 to 4.2 to give you that reassurance that this is something you may want to stick with for however long. So passing it on to tips and tricks, just again, more ways to essentially step into that community, right? This is the ultimate step is step into community of trying a new thing. Bring a buddy. This is you. You were my buddy. I didn't want to do this alone. I knew starting off with this podcast that I did not want to just be talking for 45 minutes an hour. Or honestly, if I was solo, I'd probably talk for 5. Let's be real. So, but I knew up front that I wanted to do this with someone. And I just needed someone to have kind of that same drive. And when I met you, geez, like 2 or 3 years ago, um, it was
Been that
like the
long?
light bulb.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I know
Has
it's a
been
little
that long.
bromance
Crazy.
going on. Gabby's over here making fun of us if she's listening to this. I don't care. Tanner's my
Yeah, we don't
homie,
care. Get that
and
out of here.
he's the reason we're sticking through this. So, but I think the buddy is a great way because even if either one of you don't stick through it, it's a way to get your foot in the door. It's a great way to build a relationship. And who knows, maybe the buddy loves it and you don't. And so that opened up an opportunity for them to try something they never would have thought of if it weren't for you to ask, or vice
Hmm.
versa. It did get you through the door. You were able to build those relationships. And then the buddy's like, all right, it's not for me, but you found a home here and like I'm happy for you, right? So there's all sorts of perks, I think, to the buddy system. Next tip and trick: find an experienced person that you trust. So the mentor is usually what we think of here, right? And I don't think you necessarily need the master to be this experienced person, right? Because I think this is where I use the Joe Rogan uh, example. Again, sorry, great content that didn't get quite recorded. But I don't. We don't need to talk to Joe Rogan to make a great podcast. Would he give us a lot of great information? Sure, but first of all, the man won't even have time about that, and especially for two random people in the heart of Texas, um, that's going to be very unlikely. But there are other podcasters out there, some that have kind of gone from the beginning stage to they figured out their content, they figured out what they're doing. The audio is not such a pain. They understand that now, that we could reach out to and could talk to and learn tips and tricks and shortcuts to basically ask like, hey, what was the one thing or one or two things that you did that completely jumped up your following, right? From maybe 5 listeners to 50. And we could ask that. And that would definitely help us. That would push us to the next level almost instantly because chances are, if it worked for them and it's still working, it should work for us. So finding a mentor is very valuable, not only when trying new things, but just for trying to go throughout life. And this, I think, is the most pivotal. And once you find those people that help you through life, whatever it may be, like that's what you're looking for. But it doesn't have to be, I wouldn't say necessarily in life, right? It can just be in key points of your life that you're trying to better. And this is, I kind of take my mentorship from probably the last 10 years. These There have been these people that have boosted my life, right? And oh, I don't this did not get recorded. I got to get my shout outs. So I sorry, Tanner. I know it's going to be, I'll be as fast as I can. I got to give a shout out to my peeps and go from there. But my first boss in not necessarily aquatics, but when I worked at Tom Muhlenbeck, her name was Brittany Young. And all the credit goes to the understanding of building relationship and trusting your people. I always wanted to do good, but not always was I granted the ability to prove my worth on that. And she would always listen and always take my thoughts in and even applied a bunch of them. And so I owe her that. I owe Sarah Ferris to my high standards are everything because that is pretty much her standard and her belief is what I set my beliefs off of because I was in a learning to become a lifeguard instructor, right? And I almost failed her course. She was my instructor trainer, and I almost failed because I was doing infant rescue breathing, and my breasts, I think, were like 50-50 on whether they went in. And so she was like, hey, you have an hour, and then we're going to see if you can do 40 breaths again. And if you miss one, you're done. And it was like a huge, like, heart sink moment. Like, man, this is make or break. Probably would have been the first thing I really failed too, which was a weird experience because I've always pushed myself to really get to that point where I don't have to worry about failure. You guys aren't the only one worried about failure. I'm just as worried about failure. Um, but that's why I prepare. It's why I do these pretty much these steps that we talked about. And so it was crazy to get to that. But if I was fearful, then I would have dipped and I never would have gotten to that point. But instead, I used that as encouragement. And I remember delivering my breasts, and I knew it was going to either be the first one or like the 40th one. And that was going to be the one of the two breasts that messed me up. And I got the first one, got all the way to 40. And she was just like, okay, you're good to go. And like, you're good to move on. And that was it, man. Like, and I'm so proud to have been trained by someone whose standards are really that high because I get to say that like I'm essentially her instructor, right? Like I was trained under her and that pride of knowing she's top dog, that name carries when I say I'm trained by Sarah Ferris, people are like, dang, like you're good. And so I really choose to uphold that so that people see that when I say that they're trained by me, when they're my mini me's, like there's a huge amount of pride. And I know the pride that I felt being trained like that. And I know they feel the same pride. So holding that accountability, holding that standard was everything and has really transformed into that level. And then Gabby, Blake, Charles showed me how to do this in a leadership way, right? And you know, Gabby, Blake showed me how to love people and show them support and how to encourage people and remain optimistic during the hard times. How to lead through kindness versus aggressive. I used to be super dickish, man. You did not want to make a mistake with me as the boss. It just wasn't good. And I got to learn an entirely new way to lead that to me, I still think, at least for me, is far more effective than just barking orders and heavy
Hmm.
consequences, right? And then, Charles just helping me understand who I am and how to push to discovering that. I owe that discovery to his incredible, like, soul mind bending questions and in depth life, right? And this is what really has inspired this podcast on my behalf was those people, right? These people have helped me out so much and gave me almost shortcuts to life. That's what it is. And so a lot of what you're hearing is not necessarily from me, but it's lesson that I've learned from them and from others and from self experience. But a lot of it comes from them and passing that down, essentially passing on the torch. So these are the type of people that I chose to trust, even though it went against a lot of what I did. And it's made me a much stronger person because of that. So I, again, Tanner, I apologize for the massive tangent, but,
No,
figure
you're
might as
good.
well give a shout out.
Applause to
So
those people.
it's all good. So, um, this one's yours. And this is one of my favorites, actually, which you talked about was the long term versus the short term and what that mindset really is and how thinking about the long term will help and encourage you to keep pushing through. So pass it on to you for that one.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that um, a lot of people nowadays they will fall into the problem of thinking too short term, and what I mean by that is like thinking in the moment about what you're doing. So, for example, like if you're, I'll use basketball. Okay, like if you're during a workout, right? Most of the time when you first start out in the short term, you're like, oh, I can cut off these, last 100 reps, or uh, I can like slack off a little bit in this workout, or because this workout sucks right now, I'm super tired, blah, blah, blah. That's thinking in the short term. And I think that what we need to do as people is we need to gear ourselves a little bit more towards focusing on the long term and embracing the journey that you're on, embracing that you may suck at something from the start, and moving on and embracing that you're getting better every single day. Every single day, you're getting better. And maybe that's little by little. Maybe that's, there are going to be some days where you get, way better. And then there are going to be some days where you either plateau or you get a little bit better, very small increases, right? But
Yep.
in the grand scheme of things, you're not gonna, like, when you get to that goal, you're not gonna think back on the last, to however long it took you. You're not gonna look back on that unfavorably. You're gonna look back on that favorably, being like, oh, I did that, I got through that. And that feeling, like for me, I've had that feeling once in my life, and that was when I got my degree. When I got my bachelor's degree, I was able to look back and be like, yeah, like I did that. I worked through college, and I, you know, had all my, mistakes and everything, and like, but I got through it, and like I'm a better person because of it. But in the moment, I was thinking short term. I was like, man, this sucks. Should I change my degree?
Yeah.
Like I was constantly like just focusing on how bad it was in the moment. So I get it. Like I get the mindset, because I think that's like kind of the way that we're programmed to be as people, is just like you think of what's in front of you. But it's kind of like a skill that you have to learn to be able to think about, uh, you know, have the future in mind, and have, that one goal in mind, not think so linearly about it. And I mean, I'll relate it back to the Cowboys too. I mean, they, I'm a huge Cowboys fan. I've been a Cowboys fan for as long as I can remember, when I was like 4 years old.
Or out of the womb with the star.
Yeah, yeah, born out of the womb with a star, exactly. So with a 10-gallon hat,
Yep. Yep.
but I mean, that was a crushing playoff loss, to the Packers that we faced this past
Right.
weekend. Um, but I think it's a good thing to look at, in this regard, right? So in the short term, this was like a horrible. You can't,
Yeah.
you couldn't have scripted. I mean, they made it close at the end, but Green Bay was in control of that game for most of it, right?
Yeah.
And we can look at this and be like, "Oh, this is catastrophic." But the job of like a front office who has like the, I'll say company, but football teams, like full image in
Yeah.
mind, right? They're not. I guarantee today, they're not even thinking about that playoff loss. Like they're thinking about what they're going to do in the off season. And I already saw some like news come out that the coach is returning, which I think is dumb.
That's good.
But that's a decision. That's a decision that they made. They probably got into their war room or whatever with all their trusted people, and they made that decision not based off what happened in the game, but based off what they think gives them their best chance of improving.
Oh, wait. So
So
wait, is he not coming back?
no, he is coming back. They're
Oh,
saying
he
that
is
he
coming.
is
Okay,
coming.
good. Because I was
Yeah,
about to say, okay, good.
yeah,
Want to
he
make
is
sure.
coming back. I think he's overstayed his welcome by a year. I think he should be gone. But that's just
Really?
me being a upset Cowboys fan that's seen many, many disappointing playoff losses in my life. So I'm a little bit traumatized by the Dallas Cowboys. So, um, but yeah, I think that like it's a good analogy to what we're talking about, because it's like, if all they did was wallow in their playoff loss, even just for the next 2 weeks, I mean, that would set
Mhm.
them back 2 weeks, because life goes on. Like
Yep.
the future is always getting closer. So, but speaking more on the Cowboys specifically, I think that they have a flaw with them where Jerry Jones, he's the owner, and he wants to be relevant at all times. And the way that professional sports are structured nowadays,
Mhm.
not just the NFL, but the NBA too, the best way to, if you know you're not going to win something, if you know your team is not at the capacity that they should be to win, and obviously
Right.
for the Cowboys, their goal is to win a Super Bowl, right?
Mhm.
If you know don't have the capabilities to do that, you can say without a shadow of a doubt, the best way to fix that is to blow it up and rebuild. But we have, for 25 years, we haven't done that, because Jerry is so scared of being out of the talk, right? He doesn't want to have 2 or 3 years in a row where he goes 4-12, because they
Yeah.
lose too much. They lose too much, money, or like I don't know,
Yeah,
notoriety, I guess.
viewership. Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of
Right,
it. Basically money, but yeah, I understand what you're
right.
saying.
So it's like it's been frustrating to see the last 15 years go, where it's like there probably were a lot of years where we should have just bit the bullet and just
Mhm.
gone like 2-14, get the first overall pick, draft a guy, draft a quarterback. see where he goes. And we did. I mean, we obviously drafted Dak, but I mean, Dak's been here for you know uh, almost 10 years
Well,
now. You know, and
long.
how many playoff wins has he had? One. So
Yeah.
it's
And
I don't know.
this brings up your point, right? This is the long-term versus short-term battle. Is you basically said it. Jerry Jones is worried about the blow up because the short term is it's going to be heavy loss.
Hmm.
Teams losing, that's going to lead to money losing,
Right.
and it's not going to be good. And he has to be comfortable to let that go because the long term is always the game. This is the game that no one plays, no one looks at. And
Right.
to be frank, the most successful people, and I'm not talking wealthy, I'm just talking successful, mastery of whatever. They are successful because they're playing the long term game. In 10,000 hours of mastery, you're not going to be at your peak all 10,000 hours.
Right.
And I think people are actually a little bit maybe concerned for themselves of the same concept. How am I supposed to blow up my game? How am I to or this mastery thing? Like, how am I supposed to completely start from scratch? But that is and can be probably the most beneficial thing for you. And Charles
Hmm.
calls this the beginner mindset, right? Which is if you approach whatever your problem is with the beginner's mindset versus an experienced mindset, you may be better off with that solution. And
Hmm.
so going to the Cowboys, I want to keep this analogy going. We need to completely change things. And it can't just be subtle changes. The big subtle change that they talked about for this past season was the offense program, right? Like there was just basically a new playbook. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I believe they were talking about. Was a dramatic playbook change.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think they were changing who was going to call plays because it was a couple years ago. It was Kellen Moore, and then
Mhm.
he got a coaching gig somewhere, and then it was a decision between our OC now and Mike McCarthy, and I think McCarthy took it
McCarthy,
over.
yeah, I think is the caller now, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think
So
so.
that was it. And but that's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's a small change, but in regards to the big picture of that, that's just one little extra adjustment.
Right.
And it may be better off. And this is how I've helped people with trying to figure out what's the perfect middle point. And I use quotes on that because that scale is always sliding left to right. Um, but you should try what's called bracketing, right? So when you make an adjustment, you set it to one end of extreme, right? We're blowing up one side. But then, and you reflect and you analyze and you see that. But when you make the next adjustment, you pretty much go all the way to the other end extreme. And then you
Hmm.
reflect and you see on that. So that by your third attempt, you find that perfect middle point that is actually where you needed to be. And if we're going to talk about this in football years, that's basically a minimum of 3 years to go back to playoff potential. Minimum.
Yeah.
Because you can't just change everything week one, week two, week three. You have to do the same thing for 16, whatever, however many games, just to even understand what truly worked because different players, different teams, different advantages all
Right.
have to be analyzed with one massive blow up decision. And but if we have to deal, I say we, I'm not a Cowboys fan, so but if Jerry Jones has
You're
to
lucky.
deal with 2, 3 years of heavy loss to analyze these things, we can sacrifice 2 to 3 years for extraordinary results down the road where it's
Right.
winning more than one playoff. Maybe it's winning two playoffs or three, or maybe we get, to that Super Bowl moment. But you're never gonna, I think they will get better, with this step by step process. but it could be 5, 7, 10 years. It could take a lot longer
Yeah.
than if they just say, okay, let's blow this up. Let's start with this. This is our massive focus. And then let's see how this plays and
Right.
reflect on everything. And then, okay, this is what we did. This is what we got. So now, massive extreme fix on the other side. Let's see how this plays out. Because sometimes what happens if you get lucky is you hit the mark on the second try. Not always, and that's not the point. Your goal is supposed to go past the target, but sometimes what you thought was extreme was actually just all that you needed. And
Hmm.
that's the whole point of bracketing is a lot of people like to make too many small adjustments, and it's like, okay, here's my target way over here, and here's my adjustments that I'm making. Oh, another adjustment. Oh, another adjustment. Oh, another adjustment. It's just too long a process. So when you think of the long term spectrum, I think any of us would sacrifice 2 or 3 years of not great for a massive explosion of
Yeah.
peak. And this is it does tie back into this new thing concept. We want to kind of just get better and hope that that path lies. And really, what happens, and this is why a lot of people will stop something. So I do want people to be cognizant of that. Is there's going to be a plateau effect where you just you talked about like nothing, maybe even get worse. Maybe you're on a decline. But the reason for that is because you're just doing what you already know and you're
Hmm.
not trying something completely new. And there's an ego challenge to just attempting that. There's also an ego challenge to continue being a beginner again at something and fumbling, and making and
Right.
messing up and making mistakes all over again. But that's how you learn and that's how you grow. We've already talked about that. You have to mistakes, you have to fail in order to learn. So if you're plateauing, you're not getting any better, or maybe you're getting worse, that's probably because we don't want to make mistakes again. We don't want to go back to that feeling, and we have to let go of that ego and go back to that beginner's mindset for us to peak back up again. And that is what growth is. And you can look at, I think the stocks are like a great example. Like a successful stock is not straight line to the top. It goes up, it
Right.
goes down, but it's constantly going up over
Even
time.
Bitcoin. Even
Yeah.
Bitcoin. Most people think that Bitcoin was just like, oh my God, $10 one day, and then next day it was 55 grand.
Thousand.
But
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, it's gone. Yeah, it's goes like that all the way
Mhm.
up.
So, and that's how you determine really success is while you may have a down point, is that down point still better than when you started? Which is probably true, you know?
Hmm.
And then that should hopefully give you a little bit courage to, okay, I'm going to keep working on this and then watch the growth from there. And that's really how you should probably reflect on growth is you're going to have, they always say you're going to have ups and downs, but they don't say how you get out of that down. And to get out of that down, you have to keep doing that new thing and you have to keep working on it and start from scratch essentially, quote unquote, on that, but in order to grow past where you got stuck.
Right.
So love the analogy. Cowboys I think is a great example. um it was a hard thing to watch, although I am slightly a Packers fan, so it's pretty entertaining to watch. But
It
you
was
do
hard to talk
see
about,
that
man.
potential with them, right? Because
Yeah.
that last quarter and a half, we know they know what they're doing, and it's just not doing it the first time, right? And this is what they have to figure out. So
Hmm.
we'll see how it goes.
Just got to figure out how to not be down 14-0 6 minutes into a home playoff game.
Hmm.
Dak's got to
But
figure out how to
maybe,
not
and
throw
this is
three
actually a very
picks.
good point, right? You talked about Mike McCarthy, and you think maybe he's overstayed his welcome. Maybe that's the blow up that they need. Is Mike McCarthy can get them to the playoffs, but when it comes to playoff mentality, maybe he just can't teach that. Maybe he can't lead that. And maybe we need
Yeah.
someone. I think the player base is good. Dak is good. CD Lamb is insane. Pollard doing great things for himself. And then he's got was it whoever the tight end is, Ferguson or something like that.
Yeah,
Like
Jake
even
Ferguson.
he saved that game with the Packers from being utter destruction.
Yeah,
And like they have the players. They and I'm not saying Mike McCarthy is a bad leader. I'm not. That's not what I'm trying to say. Is but sometimes you need the leader that you need, and not necessarily the leader that you want.
yeah,
And that's a really crazy thing to kind of wrap your mind around, right? And when and I'll go. I'm going to tangent. I'm sorry, but just to really visualize this picture, this past off season, I did a competition in October, and then I did one in November. And I had like my mentor as my coach in October, and because we play the same exact game, so it just made sense that he was my coach. And I won two and I lost two, and that was it. And didn't even place. I got like fourth, so unfortunate. But I realized when he was coaching me, it just wasn't what I needed. And so then I go and I compete again in November and I have a different coach. And my coach made a decision. And he even said, like, I'm sorry I wasn't your coach, but you know, felt like this coach was better for you. And I felt like there was a lot of white belts, brand new people that competed now. When he goes, I felt like they needed me a little bit more. And so he was aware of that, gives me this other coach, and he was phenomenal. It was everything that I needed. And when I got to finals, I had a great position. I tried to go for a submission, and he was like, Parker, no, like scolded me like a dog. And I was like looking up, like, I'm sorry. And he was like, and he stopped me quickly, which is what I needed, and he told me what to do, which is exactly what I needed. And it got me back in mindset. And then after that, I didn't listen to him the rest of the round, but I needed him in that moment. And I don't
yeah.
necessarily think that my coach could have done it. And I won gold. And
Nice.
so it's thank you. I got a medal I'll show you.
Wow, yeah.
But this is it. It's a good lesson to realize that the leader that you want is not always the leader you may need. And this is what I think maybe was with McCarthy is I think he's a great leader. You know, clearly they're doing great things every single season. Like they're having positive records and they're doing well. But maybe the Cowboys need a leader that's going to get them through the playoffs, not through the main season.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
I think that it falls down to like a culture thing
yeah.
with the Cowboys. I mean we walk around like we own the place.
Well, it's the community, right? Like we talk about the community. And the community is so pivotal. That's why it's the most crucial step in this process. Like you can find a good community, you will dramatically improve than if you're in the wrong community. And that's just
Mhm.
bar none. So you have to be in a community that you thrive in, and you need that culture, like you're talking about, to ignite and keep it aflame. Because the
Right.
one thing that's going to kill a community is bad culture. And who kills culture? Leaders.
Right.
So as long as you have great leaders, you'll have a great culture. If you don't have good leaders, you're not going to have a good culture. And that's it. It's a very simple. Last but not least, still have hit a insane amount of time. Whatever, it's great. Um, expect to be bad, try to be better. This is to me the deep breath. If I'm going to go and I'm going to try something new, it's not fair for me to expect myself to be perfect. That's too much stress. It's too much anxiety. So go in knowing you're going to be bad, and that's okay. And you have to kind of accept those terms and conditions. But every day, just try to be a little bit better. Try to
Mhm.
learn something, ask a question, ask multiple questions, have intent on trying to be better. And if you do these things, you should see results. Maybe not right away, but when they always say you know was a is it who quoted it. You'll get this in an instant, but you miss 100% of shots you don't take.
Yeah, I think
Whatever that.
so.
Yeah.
Wayne
Um,
Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Wayne Gretzky. Thank you. Yeah, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. I knew it was Michael Scott, but I needed to get the initial person in there.
Hold
But
on. I actually
yeah,
have. I literally have a. Let me see if I can find it somewhere. Where is it? I have a picture frame that has that in it.
is it Michael
I can.
Scott or is it Wayne
Oh, here it
Gretzky?
is. No. Okay, well, this is a picture of me and my grandfather. I don't know why I put this in this frame, but I don't know if you can read. Can you read
Yeah.
it?
Oh, yeah. You always miss the shots. 100% shots you don't take. Yep.
And then there's,
Boom.
yeah, that's
That's good.
random. But I don't know. I don't even know
Yeah,
why I have this frame. It doesn't even have. I think it's Michael Jordan on it, but I don't even think he said that. So,
that's
but a
funny.
good quote, regardless. Yeah, good
It is
quote.
a great quote. But I feel like a lot of people hear that and are like, that's cliche. It's done for, right? It's overused.
Yeah.
And but the mentality is still there. That's what's important. Is it's true. If you don't take the shot, you have no idea if you're gonna make it. So why fill your brain with all this like unknown and play the what if game? Because I think I had this in here. I don't know where this went. This was a great quote. Um, I don't know where it went. But stop filling your heads with what if and unknowns with potential things and fill it with experience. This is the key. If you want to have doubts, only have doubts after you experience them. Never have doubts about the future. This is what's inhibiting people so much is they keep playing the what if game and those what ifs become so extreme that it builds so much fear that they're not willing to try it because it's too scary of what ifs.
Hmm.
And all you have to do is just see what that experience is actually like. And if you do that, you're going to be more likely to step into community, more likely to see, and never, I don't think it's usually ever as scary as it looks at like. And I
Right.
do jiu-jitsu where the whole purpose of jiu-jitsu is to make you go unconscious or break something. And terribly terrifying. And my what if game is what if I break my arm on the first day? What if I go unconscious? What if I die? Like, and this is the extreme thoughts that comes to people. And you know what my first day was like? Oh, hey, how are you? I'm gonna I'm the instructor. Here's how you tie your belt. If you have any questions, let me know. You're just going to drill today. You're not gonna roll. Only when you're comfortable can you roll. Right? So I just got welcomed in. I know what an instructor is. I learned the most complicated thing in the world, which is how to tie your belt. And then I forgot it. I think it took me like 2 weeks to learn that, but sidebar. Um, and then when I finally rolled, instead of it being this death brawl where I was like getting squished and put in this terrible position, I was treated with care. When I good, my partner was like, that was good. Good job. And when I didn't, he was like, oh, you made a mistake here. And then like, it was fun with it.
Hmm.
And then at the end, he sat with me and he gave me tips and tricks to for him not to capitalize on that in the future. So I didn't get anything broken. I didn't go unconscious and I didn't die. And instead, with experience, I made a good friend. He showed me, he was pretty much like he was like purple belt. He was pretty good. And he just showed me what he knew and he passed that along to me. And I was able to grow from that. So these what ifs and this game that we play ourselves to make it not worth it is 1,000 times worth it.
Right.
So I expected to be bad, but I didn't and I expected to get crushed, but I didn't get crushed and I was able to ask questions and build this relationship to be better. And now I'm stuck, kind of stuck with it. I love jiu-jitsu too much to give it up at this point. So, and that's it. Those are the main pros and tips. That's the 4-step program. Um I really like this. I think we can really expand to try new things and bring that comfortability to this concept. A lot of people are going to figure out who they really are, what they like, what they don't like, what kind of
Hmm.
person they want to be. It's really the trying of the new things that develop our character and push us to where we need to be. And I feel like so many people feel like they're lost or in a rut because they haven't tried these things,
Right.
because they're fearful of it. And I feel like we've turned into a fearful culture, and it just has put us into a downward spiral, right? A huge slippery slope of fear of failure, fear of the unknown. And so I'm going to put myself in a box, and
Right.
this is my box, and this is where I'm at. And that's just, you can live and you can be content with your life through that. But if you're trying to feel success and mastery of life, and once again, success is not wealth. Success is just, are you happy with the person that you are? Are you happy
Yeah.
with the life that you live? And can you fulfill that life? This
Success
is success.
can be wealth,
It
but it's
can be
not.
wealth,
Yeah, it's not
but
all
it
of it.
doesn't
Yeah.
have to be wealth. It really
Yeah.
just has to be those three things.
Hmm.
And I just really want to push that wealth is not the answer. Figuring out who you are and maximizing that is the answer. So there you go. Secret of life, meaning of life. That's it. It's, I don't know why so many people like philosophize on this. Like, we're alive. We might as well be the best version of ourselves so that we can be the best for others.
Right.
And how do we start that? Trying new things.
100%.
Well, that's the end. Into the barefoot world and what's going on. Nothing's changed since episode 2, part 1 of this, but just to clarify some dates, maybe explain a little bit better. LGI, lifeguard instructor trainings, those applications are out. We already have like 30 or 40 for
Ooh,
DFW, and I think
nice.
about 15 or so for Houston. So numbers are looking good, but that also means classes are filling up fast. So if you're trying to sign up, you need to sign up sooner rather than later, and make sure you get on those courses because we're about to do great things with training. So for DFW, session 1, it's going to be January 27th, January 28th, February 3rd, February 4th. Session 2, February 17th, February 18th, February 24th, February 25th. Session 3, March 2nd, March 3rd, March 9th, March 10th, and then session 4 is March 11th through March 13th. So those are the dates that we're looking at. Everything's 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. You must attend every single day, and that's pretty much all you get. And then for Houston, pretty much the same dates. Session 1, January 27th, 28th, February 3rd and 4th. Session 2, February 17th and 18th, and then February 24th through 25th. And session 3 is March 11th through 14th. So Houston only has 3, DFW has 4. Our lifeguard tube is final product, and we're having people test it out. Absolutely phenomenal device, and I really think it's going to change the community. So we'll keep you updated. We get to use them. Our goal is to use them this summer, but I'll try and keep you updated. But it's looking really good, and I think that's it. Tanner, we got any other stuff?
No, I don't think
Cool.
so.
Well, as always, thank you so much for everyone that's listening. We love and appreciate y'all. Could not do this without you guys. You are what makes us. We love you all very much. There's our
Love you
heart of
guys.
victory. Over now.
Go Cowboys.